So Sister is going to share with us a topic on the legacy of Pope Francis in relation to the concern for the environment and the rights of the marginalized persons. Pope Francis wrote a pastoral letter named Laudatos. Laudatos. It is a letter, it is a communication from the Pope calling for protection of the environment, the earth as our common home. So, Sister, you are most welcome.
Thank you, Council, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. To my Lord Bishop, the clergy, the Legal Fraternity of Uganda, my brothers and sisters, as my name has just been called, I'm Sister Leonida Katunge, and I thank you, my council, that you've just mentioned or called my name rightly, because many Ugandans call me Katunge, but I'm Katunge. I am from Kenya, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and a theologian. And as I sit here, I'm seated as the chairperson of the board of the Catholic Lawyers International. I am honored to be here to speak to you. As first, I thank the organizers of this great day who have called us together to come and celebrate the life of Pope Francis. I've been asked to talk on matters to do with the environment and the rights of the marginalized. But I decided to take a different route, because when I met Pope Francis, it was not to do with the environment. It had to do with a different group of people in the society, and that was the youth. And the second time I met him, it had to do with the marginalized and those people who are living in the peripheries of the world where none of us was thinking of them. Brethren, this day as we gather as a people of faith to honor the life and legacy of a true servant of God, a man who not only transformed the global church, but also has left an indelible mark of the soil of Africa. This is His Holiness Pope Francis. He was a global voice of the conscience, and his love for us, for the church, and more specifically for the church in Africa, and Africa as a continent, cannot be taken for granted. Today, millions of African Christians, and even those of other faiths, the Muslims, are speaking of this man, Pope Francis, and his impact to the world. Most likely, many of them have never heard of him or even thought of calling on his name, not until the time of his death. I've received so many messages from my friends, the Muslims, those who are saying sorry for the death of the Pope, to show that he was not only the Pope or the Bishop of Rome and the Vicar of Christ, but the voice of everyone, especially the poor, the voiceless, the marginalized, the migrants, the elderly, the youth, the prisoners, the refugees. He was a pastor and a friend to all. When he was elected to the papacy in 2013, he brought with him a deep awareness of the sufferings and the hopes of humanity, particularly the people of the global south. He himself having come from Latin America, where he knew the sufferings within and outside the society and the church at large. Allow me to charge my laptop. For those of us who had the privilege to encounter him and work with him, and I was happy when I saw one of the senior counsels say that they met him in Rome, we are mourning not only just a man, but one person who spoke the truth, who spoke to power, and he had no fear of anyone. I remember when he passed on Monday, after 2 hours, I received a message from London, BBC, calling me for an interview. And they gave me a list of questions. And one of them was, who was Pope Francis to you? And what are some of the issues that he spoke about pertaining to Africa? And what are some of the languages that he said that were not forthcoming for most of the people in the world? Of course, I'm happy to hear people from Uganda speaking about LGBTQIA and how his message was taken with the fiducia supplica. And at the end of the day, you realize that you're speaking because of the position that you hold. He spoke from the position that he held as a leader because he was a pope who was inclusive and he held all as brothers and sisters. Africa is a home to nearly a fifth of the world's Catholic population, with over 280 million Catholic faithful. And slowly by slowly, it has become the central part or the center of understanding Christianity. Many say Pope Francis did so much to elevate the continent's role within the Church's universal institution. Pope Francis did not only see Africa as a continent of problems as others do, but he saw it as a potential continent, rich in its culture, faith, and that was strong in all what she wanted to do. He never remained silent about the injustices that plagued our people, from the rural communities battered by climate change to the urban poor enshrined in cycles of poverty and exploitation. His voice rose in defense of the forgotten and those afflicted. My Lord Bishop, my brothers and sisters, I speak not only out of admiration, but from my personal experience of Pope Francis. If you see my background, the screen that I have is me and the Holy Father. This was an encounter that we had on the 1st of November, 2022, where Pope Francis initiated a program called Building Bridges Initiative. He engaged with the youth from Africa, from Uganda, Kenya, Cameroon, Nigeria, Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, DRC, Congo-Brazzaville, and beyond. When we met the Holy Father, we had discussions on matters relating to the climate, relating to unemployment, the place of the youth in the leadership of the church, and how our leaders are corrupt. Pope Francis listened to us, and at some point he said, it is time that the society and the church begins to think of the youth. Then he gave us a promise that he will never forget the role that the youth have in the church, because they are the church, not of tomorrow, but the church of now. In 2023, again, I encountered Pope Francis with the youth in Asia. It is here where he reminded us of the challenges that we are facing due to modernity, urbanization, and technology, as well as corruption. But he could not stop saying, we are with you, our young people, because you are the church of now. In 2021, when we officially entered into the celebration of the Synod of Synodality, an initiative arose from Pope Francis called L'Iglesia te escucha, the church is listening to you. This was what under the dicastery for communications in the Vatican. And this time round, we encountered Pope Francis, who was not just telling us on what we are supposed to hear, but telling us what we were supposed to say, because he said he was listening to us. It is actually the aspect of listening that was key in the Synod of Synodality, because when you are speaking to Pope Francis, he would at some times be taking notes, but at the same time listening. And I like the image that I have on my background, because if you can see it clearly, he's just looking at me, listening to me. And in 2022, he engaged us again to work with the people who are living in the marginal places of the world. This was a global project that was begun by the Pope himself, do theology from the existential peripheries of the world. We went to places that we've never thought of as theologians to try to get information for Pope Francis. He gave us the mandate to do it on his behalf because he could not get everywhere as much as he wanted. And when the report was given to him, he was happy and he said, this is a report that calls us to take an action, because for him, he was hearing the people speak to us, and speaking to us, actually, they were speaking to him. In all this work that I did with the Pope, I've witnessed that he was a true shepherd. He had a dream for us, for the church, and more specifically, for the people of Africa. He said that there was a need to stand tall in dignity, peace, and justice. Pope Francis said that Africa is full of surprises. In any place that he went in Africa, this was one of his utterances, because he said anytime he was addressing the people of Africa, he got a surprise. This is a continent that, described as the future of the Catholic Church, did not for him fall too far, because not once, not twice, but 10 times he came to Africa, journeying across our land, walking through the dusty roads, embracing our people, and calling us to be artisans of peace. In 2015, 2 years after his election, he visited Kenya. He came to Uganda and to Central Africa. And I remember it was by chance that he came to Kenya, because when the then Cardinal John Jue of Kenya had met him in Rome, he said, I'm visiting Africa. I'm coming to Uganda and Central African Republic. Cardinal Jue told him, please, before getting to Uganda, come to Kenya, because the way to Uganda is through Kenya. And for sure, he honored us and he came to Kenya, then to Uganda. In 2017, Pope Francis went to Egypt. 2019, he went to Mozambique, Madagascar, Morocco, and Mauritius, where he championed for peace, justice, and refugees' rights, and care of our common home, that is the environment, speaking of how we are connected to what God created. When he was in Uganda, I remember he did not forget to honor the legacy of the Uganda martyrs, where he called you Ugandans to witness, not in comfort, but in courage of the faith that was planted by the Uganda martyrs. He encouraged you in Uganda to speak to the needs of time, to speak the truth, and to work for justice and reconciliation. And he could not forget to tell us when he was in Kenya how we were supposed to resist from corruption, tribalism. And I remember him say that corruption is like sugar. We like it because it is sweet, but then we end up diabetic. He was not speaking like a politician, but he spoke like a man who understood the people he was addressing. He ended up going to DRC and South Sudan. And here, he could not forget of the people of these two countries that are war-torn, and they've suffered from exploitation because of the minerals that they have. And I remember him shouting, Congo, hands off the Democratic Republic of Congo, hands off Africa, because he was afraid of the exploiters who were coming to get all what the poor continent had. He said we needed each other and we must take a new path of fraternity, a path of reconciliation and hope. As I said, and men have said, he was soft-spoken. He was not a politician, but all his messages of mercy had an origin from the gospel, because for him, he was speaking to people he understood and people he longed to be with. The legacy of Pope Francis in Africa is not marked by where he went, whom he met, who challenged him, but who is listening to the voice of Pope Francis right now. This is because he has left, is gone, but all what he did is with us. He gave us a model of leadership through his care of the environment, and as mentioned, by writing the encyclical Laudato Si, take care of our common home, where he called us not to exploit, but to use what God has given us with care, because there is a generation that is awaiting still to come in this world to live in the same environment where we're living. And if we mess with it now, then where will they live? He was rooted in humility. And we can see this from how he handled the people he was meeting, the prisoners, kissing their feet, and even visiting them, sometimes even when they least expected him. He was a man of encounter, and this is very key in the theology of Pope Francis. And also, he spoke of service. He said, it's time that we go out of our comfort zone and be people who are serving those who are in need. The baton is passed to us. And I like when most of you are speakers who came before me have been speaking of how today our leaders are out, not because they need to have the people, but actually they're expecting the people to have them. They're living in a life that calls for an audit of lifestyle that they're living. It's life of power. It's life where everyone is looking for money. People want respect. And this is not what Pope Francis was for. I wish, and I call that each one of us, the clergy, the lawyers in the house, and anyone, because I know there's some people here who are not lawyers who are listening to each one of us who is speaking. You just pick one of the values and virtues that was lived and that has been left with us by the person of Pope Francis. To our political leaders, he has offered us an example of moral courage, mercy in governance and leadership, and an inclusive leadership, because this was his language. To a beloved bishop and the clergy, is reminding us that shepherds must smell like the sheep, with hearts full of compassion and love. To us, lawyers, he's challenging us to seek justice not only in the courtrooms, but through compassion for the poor, the vulnerable, and those who cannot afford our services, and without mentioning that we are being called to be people who offer pro bono services for the good of the people we are serving. And I heard one of the speakers mentioning this. Pope Francis believed in the world, but more specifically in our continent, Africa. He did not see us as a abandoned continent, but as a bright future for the church. And I'm saying this because studies has it that Africa has the largest number of Christians, not in terms of number 1 to 100, but in terms of the growth and the conversions that we are having compared to the Western and to other parts of the world. And this is the reason why Pope Francis could not forget to remind us of the role we have as Africans and as Christians in carrying on the message of Christ to the whole of the world. And I call upon each one of us in our own capacities and in our own places of work not to disappoint that vision of Pope Francis, because I see and I know he will be looking at you, at me, to continue with this vision. Let us continue building the bridges that he started across the generations, across tribes, and across political divides. I know Africa as a continent is suffering from so many political differences. People are fighting, even in the smallest villages where you don't expect war. We are having so many challenges where generations are not agreeing with one another. We are having tribal clashes. We are having serious issues that need us as lawyers and as the clergy and the people of goodwill to address. Let us keep a faith that is bright, that is warm, that goes forth. Let us be people who forgive. Let us call and let us be a people of hope. And I thank him that before he died, he began the year of the Jubilee, and now we are being called pilgrims of hope. Are we people of hope? Do we have a tomorrow? Are we a people who are calling others to follow in the way that the Holy Father has initiated for us? Let us walk in this path together, and may we always remember to pray that through his intercessions in our countries, in Africa, where we have war, where we have divisions, poverty that is calling us every day, where we have so many challenges, then we should now speak and we should be out and say, Pope Francis, you set an example for us. It's time now for us to do that what you began so that we can bring it to a completion. Brothers and sisters, I thank you, and we continue to pray for the repose of his soul, and we continue to pray that what God began in him, which has been accomplished, may continue now in us, so that we may have a better future as a continent and as a people. And we pray that his soul rests in eternal peace. Thank you.